Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be with you here this morning, especially after two such distinguished speakers. I'm Matthew Chalk from the Floow, and I'm going to talk with you this morning about mobile distraction. But first of all, I'd just like to introduce the company to you. So, who is the Floow? So, we are a team of 120 very enthusiastic individuals, headquartered in Sheffield, in the north of England, and with an Americas team headquartered in Detroit. And largely, we're scientists. More than 70% of the company are scientists. So social scientists and data scientists who analyze the links between driving behaviors and risk, and then computer scientists who encapsulate those insights into code and products to help our insurance partners price more accurately, to help them attract and retain users, to reduce costs through lower loss ratios, and importantly, to help them to learn and build their own intellectual property. Now, we're very fortunate to have a wonderful bunch of clients. Firstly, our very first client, our friends from Direct Line, who we've been working with for several years, powering their usage-based insurance programs across their various brands. HDI in Germany, Fidelidade in Portugal, AIG in Ireland, and our friends from Munich Re, who I think are here today, where we are their global UBI and driving data analytics partner globally. And in the US, we power the UBI services of the likes of the AAA group of companies, Plymouth Rock, and commercial lines programs, the likes of Progressive, the grandfather, if you like, of usage-based insurance. And in essence, we are a data refinery. So in much the same way that an oil refinery takes its raw product, crude oil, and refines that into fuels and plastics and various derivatives, we take our raw product, which is driving behavior data, and we refine that into various risk outputs. So risk scores that insurers can use in their pricing models, individual behavior component scores that can be used so users can moderate their behavior, insurers can run intervention programs, and the associated consultancy to build those scores into pricing models and help our partners build their own intellectual property. Now you see at the top, it's quite key, we say data from any device. We take and process data from all sources, provided it's of good quality, we turn this into highly predictive scores. So we process data from connected cars, from black boxes, OBD devices, and from mobile apps. But the very key shift that we're seeing, there's a very, very distinctive shift from devices to mobile apps. And the reason for that, hopefully, will become very, very clear. So I'm going to introduce the topic today for mobile distraction with a video. It's about a minute long, but please do give it your attention, because I think it's a really, really good introduction to the topic. So, hard-hitting, right? I'd love to have run that same experiment here this morning, but unfortunately, not possible. There is loads of research in this area. You can do a quick Google search, and there have been many, many studies here concluded on this. And whilst there's some difference in the numbers, largely the research is really, really uniform. This is prevalent. We use our phones a lot whilst we're driving. Just an observational study in London a few years ago found that where they are watching drivers in London and using scanners to detect hands-free use as well, nearly 8% were using their phones whilst driving. Good old taxi drivers, nearly 1 in 7 of them, actually over 1 in 7, were using their phones whilst driving, and roughly 10% of van drivers. But the really interesting thing is, young drivers, those that we know are the riskiest to insure, these are the drivers that are most using their phones whilst driving. Yet most young drivers programs in the market, usage-based insurance programs, aren't measuring this really, really crucial behavior. And it's not just the UK, also in the US. So we conducted a study with one of our US clients, and looking at the data, we found that over 90% in the 3-month period were making handheld calls, 91% hands-free calls, and critically, only 6% of them weren't using their phones whilst they're driving. So this is prevalent across most territories. But does it matter? Well, emphatically, yes, according to the research. Phone distraction really impairs driving behavior. It leads to longer reaction times for braking and reacting to traffic signals, an impaired ability to keep in the correct lane. And I'm guilty. I found myself recently doing Spotify on my phone, and I found myself in a different lane, and I'm sure probably many others here have done a similar thing. And it leads to shorter following distances. And a separate UK study quantified this. So drivers' reaction times are 50% slower than normal, and amazingly 30% slower than those drivers at the legal drink driving limits. They've had a few drinks, and it was actually slower reaction times than that. And in terms of how much slower, half a second. Is that much? In reality, that means at 70 miles an hour, that's 15 meters longer braking distance. So it's really, really significant. And this impaired driving performance leads directly into increased risk. So a very large US study, studying over 200,000 accidents, found that it's 9 times greater fatal accident risk if you're using your phone whilst driving. And incredibly, that's a 3 times greater risk than drunk driving. So if we think back to those young drivers we looked at just now, we know the younger generation don't drink much anymore, but what we do know is that they're doing a lot of this behavior that's 3 times more risky than drink driving, and we're not measuring it. The World Health Organization also conducted a study and found that mobile phone use whilst driving increased your crash risk by 4 times. And interestingly, it didn't make much difference whether it's a handheld or hands-free call, because actually the physical distraction effect was negligible compared to the cognitive distraction effect of not concentrating on the task, driving a vehicle, but instead on your conversation. And text messaging has an even higher impact, 23 times more likely to have to perform some evasive maneuver if you're texting whilst driving. So if you look at the research, it's all really clear. Some might say it's 9 times more risky or 6 times more risky, but all the research says it's prevalent, it impairs driving performance, and it increases risk. So what do we see at the Floow? So we measure this data using a variety of means with our mobile apps. And what we have here is 2 of our clients that have allowed us to use this data without the absolute claims frequency. One's a US client, one's a European client. And we see client after client the same thing, that mobile phone distraction is a really, really accurate predictor of risk. So what we have here on the x-axis is all of the drivers lined up in order of their score. So in the first decile on the left, you have the drivers with the worst score. They're using their phones the most. On the right-hand side, you see the drivers with the best score. They're using their phones the least. And on the y-axis is the relative claims frequency, relative to the 4th decile. So what you can see here is those drivers who are using their phones the most have double the claims frequency than those drivers who are using their phones the least. And this is our standard out-of-the-box score before any training. So mobile distractions are a really, really accurate predictor of risk, And most of the usage-based insurance programs at the moment aren't measuring this critical factor. How do we measure it? So we measure two key forms of distraction. First of all, call state. How much you're using your phone whilst driving, how long you're using it for, and also how many times your phone rings, because even that's a distraction. And we also measure physical interaction with the phone whilst driving to produce your driving score. And just to give you an example, you can see the graph on the top right there, gives you an example of the sort of behavior we see. So those colored lines are the accelerometer data from the phone on the 3 axes. And you can see the user there, they started their call, and the accelerometer traces are flipped because they basically picked the phone up from the seat to start making their call. And at the end of the call, they put their phone down, and you can see it sort of resets to a similar setting. But then they change again because the phone has fallen off the seat, and the driver, whilst driving, then reaches into the footwell to pick the phone back up and put it on the seat again. So it's really, really quite alarming behavior. But phone distraction is really just a suite of scores that we provide to users. And I want to show you sort of how it sits relative to the others. So what we have here again is charts with the claims frequency number removed to protect client confidentiality. But all these charts are on the same scale, so you can see the relative predictiveness. So what we have here is smooth driving, so a measure of your aggressiveness whilst driving. And you can see, again, on the left, those with the worst score have a higher claims frequency than those with the best score on the right. So that's what you expect. Smoother drivers claim less. We have speed. So again, those with the worst speed performance have a significantly higher claims frequency than those with the best speed performance. And critically, we're here not using speed limits here. We're comparing driver speed with other road users, which we find is a much higher predictor of risk. Time of day, those that drive more at night claim more frequently. And what we think we're pulling out here in the bottom 2 deciles is probably your night shift workers. But here we go, mobile distraction. So you can see on the same scale, mobile distraction is more predictive than those other factors. So whilst all those usage-based insurance programs in the market are right to be analyzing speed performance, and they're right to be analyzing smooth driving, they're missing largely the most critical factor of all, which actually is mobile distraction, which is the most significant predictor of risk. And here we have the aggregated user score. And to give you an idea, these out-of-the-box scores, untrained, before we've trained them against claims data, typically you're looking at 2 to 3 times uplift between best and worst scores. When we train them, typically looking 6 to 8 times uplift between best and worst scores. So we capture this data through 2 primary means. The first one is through our mobile apps. So here we have our Floow Drive app. Straight out of the box, day one, it produces predictive scores, white labeled with client branding, automatically captures journeys and tags them by car journey, train journey, boat journey, cycle journey, and it scores the behavior for the car journeys. What we have here showing is the TripMate, which is our B2C brand. It's available to download, so I invite you all to try it. You can download it from the Apple or Android app stores. If you just search for TripMate, you can start measuring your driving behavior, and also that will include your phone distraction. The second way we do this is we help our partners who have already invested in usage-based insurance programs, where they've already made a significant investment in black boxes or OBDs into vehicles. And what we do here is we score the data from the devices they've already invested in, and we produce more predictive, smooth, and speed and time of day scores. But then what we do in parallel is with our mobile app, we capture the same journeys, and through data science wizardry, we match those journeys so we can overlay that with this extra predictive factor of mobile distraction, producing ultimately an even more predictive risk score. So getting the scores is one thing. How do you act on them is the other. What we then do is we manage reward programs to help our partners engender and reinforce the right behaviors. Our experience shows that small value, frequent rewards are much more effective than the promise of a discount in 12 months at actually getting the change in behaviors you want, getting users to use their phones less, getting users to drive more slowly. But for the more errant drivers, the bottom 10 to 20%, we use telephone coaching programs. We found this is very effective at getting drivers, largely young drivers, to use their phones much less and to drive more slowly. Typically, we're seeing claims frequency reductions of 30%, and we're seeing for every 13 drivers that go through the telephone coaching program, so every 100 drivers that go through the program, there are 13 fewer claims. So really proven and effective results from coaching, particularly in reducing phone usage. So I really want to leave you with one message, and that's just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. So just because it's legal to drive at 60 miles an hour on a rural A road, it doesn't mean that's a safe speed to be driving around the bends. Just because it's legal to use your phone hands-free doesn't mean it's safe. 3 numbers for you to remember. 9 times increase in fatal accident risk, 3 times more risky than drink driving, and a 4 times higher crash risk. Thank you for your time. Wish you a good conference, and hopefully see more of you later.